Okay, hopefully you guys can hear what I'm saying. Can you guys hear me? Okay, I'd just like to say welcome to this live stream. It's the first time I'm doing a live stream, so gonna get started in a minute. So first time I've done a live stream, so if I make any mistakes or I get anything wrong, I'll try better next time. So the reason I'm doing this live stream is I get a lot of messages from people asking, how I do the 3D artwork that I do and how to use the 3D software. So I thought it would be a good idea to do like a live stream online so that everyone can kind of watch and ask questions while we go through the software. We've been running our own kind of private 3ds Max user group for quite a while now, and it's a private group where we kind of get together, kind of teach each other skills, and if we have any problems in our work we can kind of ask each other. And recently, people have been saying, can you do this online? So we're hoping to kind of share kind of our skills and help people get started. So a little bit about myself. My name's Taran3D, and I run the Taran3D.com website. And so basically, I've been using 3D Studio Max for about 20 years now, on and off, and I haven't had any formal training. I was pretty much self-taught, and I think after a while using the software, I started to actually work for kind of architectural and engineering companies and interior design companies, and using 3D Studio Max in a professional capacity. So so this is my website, Taran3D.com, so you can come online here and see some of the work that I've done. I like to kind of share some of the techniques and work that I've worked on. So this is Sidi Hajur Sahib. It was by Indrajit Singh Man from Abu Dhabi who contacted me about this. And so we got a 3D scan and we remodeled the frame as it was quite badly damaged. And then we recreated a new version of it in 3D. Also, the Atom Academy School asked for a Khanda for the top of their Nishan Sahib, and this was completely modeled in 3D Studio Max, so you can see some of the design work here. You can go on here, have a look on the website. I'm also on Instagram as Taran3D, and you can have a look on here through the gallery. So I've been using 3D Studio Max for 20 years, probably 13 of those years in a professional capacity, and I think within the last 5 years I've concentrated on interactive and immersive technologies. So if you have any questions, just pop them in the comments and I'll try and cover and answer the questions that you may have. Yeah, so 3D Studio Max has been around for a long time. It's owned by Autodesk at the moment. The subscription is about £216 a month, which isn't too bad if you're using it for professional work. For those of you who are students or learning, you can get a free student version. You can have access to actually all of the Autodesk software if you go on their website, and you can create a student account and you can use all this software within an educational capacity. So that's how to get access to the software. So I think we should get started. Yeah, so this is 3D Studio Max, and one of the first things you find is when people open up 3D Studio Max, it's really quite a busy interface. I mean, there's stuff everywhere. There's grids, there's kind of buttons, widgets and sliders and things like that everywhere, and it can be a bit confusing. So what we want to try and do is, when we start teaching people, we kind of try and simplify things and do things in just move through things systematically. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of get rid of a few of these things here. So this kind of ribbon that is across here, we're not going to be using this at the moment, so the little arrow there, and you can minimize that. Okay, so we've also got this Scene Explorer on the left hand side, which tells you what objects you've got in your scene. We're not going to be using this, so see this little dotted line here. If you right click on this, and you can switch off the Scene Explorer. We're not going to be doing any animation, so this time slider down here, it's taking up space, so we don't really need that either. So we're just going to right click on these dots and we're going to get rid of the time slider. So that's gone now. So what we've got now is we've got 4 kind of viewports. One is from the top, one is viewing from the front, one is viewing from the left, and one is a perspective view. What I'm going to quickly do is just create a quick object in the middle here. So I've created a little teapot. So what's happened is when you're working in 3D, when you're working in Photoshop, obviously you have a 2D plane like this, and you can kind of draw and paint in this 2D space. But when we're working with 3D, we are working with like a 3-dimensional space, so it's not just about what you see from one side. So what we try and do is try and view things from kind of multiple perspectives. So see things from the top view, see things from the front view, from the left view, and from the perspective view as well. Yeah. So for example, if I create a box, I could create a box here, and from here it looks like it's actually next to the teapot, but from the top you can see actually it's behind. So we can kind of use all of these viewports to kind of manipulate and understand what's happening in the 3D space. So what we're going to do now, what we like to do is we try and say, look, let's start getting you working as if you were working as a professional. So we teach you how to work as a professional straight away, rather than getting you working on all these little buttons and widgets on the side. So what I'm going to do is go to the perspective view. So this is the perspective view. You can tell it's active because it's got a yellow line around it. What we tend to do is we don't tend to use all these other 4 viewports in the view, because it really restricts your view. So what we try and do is we try and just work within one viewport. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to maximize this viewport here and make it fill the screen, and the shortcut for that is Alt W. And it's also the key here. So you see a little button in the bottom right hand corner here. You can minimize and maximize the viewport. So I'm going to maximize the viewport, and it's full now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of list all the shortcuts that we're using. So we're going to put this in. So we're going to say so that's maximize viewport. Actually, I'll put that at the beginning. So Alt W is the first one. We just maximize the viewport. Okay, so the button is down here, but we want to start using the shortcuts and start getting up to speed straight away. So that's the first one. So the next thing that we're going to learn is, so we've got this viewport here. How are we going to move around this viewport? How are we going to look at things? So the first thing we're going to learn is how do we zoom in and out. So let's type in the way that we zoom in and out. The way that we zoom in and out is we use the middle mouse roll. So if I use the middle mouse button, I roll it forward and I roll it backwards, I can zoom in and out. That's the first thing we need to learn how to do, is zoom into the objects here. Wherever I point, it'll start to zoom into those locations. Okay, so the next thing we want to learn how to do is actually pan the viewport. So if I keep the middle mouse button clicked and I hold it, I can actually kind of pan this viewport. So the next shortcut we learn is pan viewport, and that is middle mouse. Okay, so now we know how to do 2 things there. So we know how to zoom in, we know how to kind of pan the viewport. The next thing we need to learn is how do we kind of look around this object. So the way that we do that is we press Alt and middle mouse button. I'll write that one down as well. So Alt and middle mouse helps us kind of orbit. Okay, so I might actually just change the order of these. Keep it easier. Okay. There we go. So we've got pan. I'll just call this pan There we go, that's a bit clearer now. So we got three controls that we know now. We know how to zoom in, we know how to pan the viewport, and we know how to press Alt and middle mouse, and we know how to look around this object. Yeah, so that's kind of three things that we've learned already. Next thing that we need to learn is, remember these viewports that we saw before, the top, front and left. Yeah, we do need those viewports, but we're not going to use it like this. The way that we're going to do it is, the way a professional would do it, is that we're going to use some shortcuts to snap to those views straight away. Yeah, so at the moment, if you look here, it says perspective. Perspective is a general kind of camera view to look at your objects, and it's kind of like a camera view. It's like you're walking around this object and having a look at it. So when we want to have a look at it from the top view, we press the T key, and so if you press T, you can see we've just gone to the top view. So the first one we learned there is T is the top view. Okay, so the next one is F, and you guessed it right, yeah, F is the front view. So if I click on F, I get the front view, and if I press L, I get the left view. So L is the left view. And then to get back to the perspective view that we were in before, you press the P button, and then we're back in the P view. So you understand that rather than using these and only having a small tiny window to work in, it's easier to just kind of maximize this viewport and just kind of use the front, left and top viewport. There's another view as well that is used, and that is the user view. So it's U, which is an orthogonal view. Now the top, front and left viewports are kind of like orthogonal views, so they're kind of like from the left, from the top going downwards. There's no perspective in there like a camera. So when you do press the middle mouse button, so if I press the middle mouse button and Alt like we use the orbit, what actually happens is it goes into orthographic view. So this is kind of like a strange looking view, which kind of doesn't look kind of like perspective. So I've switched to perspective, it looks like this. But user view can be useful. We don't use it that much, but just know that when you are in the top view and you start to rotate, and if it looks a bit funny, then you know you need to press P to go into perspective view. Okay, those are the views. So now another thing that you might have noticed is that if you look at these viewports, they're looking quite kind of like wireframe. They're see-through, so you can actually see the actual geometry of how these are structured, but in our perspective view we can't actually see that. So next thing you want to learn how to do is to actually see the objects in different ways. So how do we do that? The first one we want to learn is how to look at it in wireframe view. So we do that by pressing F3. If you press F3, it goes into wireframe see-through mode, so it shows only the wire structure of the object. If you press F3, then you see the actual full object. So that's a very important shortcut that you will use all the time. So F3 is the wireframe view. Okay. Next one is sometimes I don't want to just be able to see through, I want to be able to see the structure on top of my model, and that is the F4 key. So as you saw there, now what's happening is I'm actually seeing the structure of these objects now, so I can see the lines and the points and the edges, and so that is the F4 key. So this is called edged faces. Yeah, now you can access these by clicking this top viewport here, click on edge faces, and I can switch edge faces off, and I can switch to kind of wireframe view from here. So you can switch to wireframe and you can switch back to default shading. Yeah, but we don't tend to go to here and use those. We're not going to click here and click on front and bottom. We're just going to click on P for perspective and rotate around, and we're going to click on F for the front view. If we need that, we can press F3 to put it in shaded mode, P to go back in perspective mode, So what we're trying to do is, what we try and teach people when we first start teaching them 3D Max is how to navigate the interface, because the quicker you can navigate the interface, the quicker you can work. Yeah, so there's no point if you're kind of taking ages looking in the front viewport and in the top viewport, you know, and zooming in here and zooming in here. What we want to be able to do is very quickly kind of rotate around, zoom in and out, look at the objects that we need to, and then work in a more kind of creative way rather than a technical way. So what we're trying to do first is so now from what we've covered now, you know how to zoom in and out using the wheel, you know how to pan the interface, move around, and you know how to orbit around, look around, and you know how to look at it from the top view, you know how to look at it from the front view. And the next really important kind of shortcut that you need to learn is the Z key. So the Z key kind of basically zooms the object that you've got selected. Yeah, so if I select this teapot and I click Z, it automatically zooms onto the object. If I click the square, it press Z, it zooms onto the object. So now if I come into user mode and I press P for perspective, and now I can click on objects, and even if I've got other objects along here, I can kind of like click that one, press Z, very quickly jump to that object. I can go to the front screen, and obviously see I can't see those objects now, they're hidden behind here. So even if I go to wireframe mode, you can see they're kind of hidden behind here because they're all in the same actual space in this viewport. So I could go to the left viewport. I'm going to press L, and from here, see, I can actually see from the left view I can see these. So I can click on this and click Z. I can quickly zoom out, click on the teapot, click Z, and I can zoom onto that. I could click on P to go into perspective mode, and as you can see it's in wireframe mode, so I can press F3 to come out of wireframe mode, and if I want to see the edges I can press F4. So first thing first is just to get used to doing this. The more you get used to doing this, the quicker you will start working. So this is kind of bypassing all the other stuff that they usually teach you, like, oh, learn these buttons first and learn these zooms. Forget all that, just learn the shortcuts and learn to work really fast, because this is what you want to do. You want to be working on your object, working creatively, and not being bogged down by the interface. So very quickly zooming, looking at different objects and being able to move around and pan around and zoom out and zoom in. And the good thing about this is you can actually zoom in and you can pan at the same time. So because I've got the mouse button pressed, I've got the middle mouse button pressed, I can kind of roll in, roll out, but I can move in at the same time. So it's kind of really quite intuitive to move around. So once you're very comfortable moving things around, the next thing we want to be able to learn is how do you move things around, how we're going to kind of manipulate objects here. So how do we manipulate objects? So let's put this down. So the stuff here is just, all this stuff was just about viewports. The next thing is how to manipulate objects. So the way that things work in 3D Studio Max is everything works on a an XYZ coordinate system. So if you click on this object, you have this funny little widget that comes up in the middle, and it kind of, even though no matter where you look, it's actually see-through. So we're going to look at this. This is called the gizmo. Okay, so I'm going to put that in brackets and call that a gizmo. Okay, and what it does is it has kind of like different directions in it. So it's got the Z direction, it's got the Y direction, it's got the X direction on it, and when I put my kind of mouse over these, they kind of turn yellow. So when they're turning yellow, what it's telling me is these are the kind of directions that they can move in. Okay, if you haven't got it set to axis constraint mode, which is which allows you to kind of select these, then I'll show you that in a minute. Yeah, so if it doesn't work exactly like this, don't worry about it. I'll show you how to get it working like that. Yeah, but just try to understand the way this gizmo works. Yeah, so if I mouse over the Y axis and I click the mouse button, and the key to move things is W. Yeah, so that's the first thing we want to learn, is how do we move objects around. So the W is the move. Okay, so anytime I want to move anything, I can press the W key, I can click on this, and now I can kind of move it in that direction. So as you can see, whichever direction I look at it from, I can see that, and I can move it in this direction, left to right. I can move it forwards and backwards if I click on that angle, and I can click up and down on this angle. And you don't need to know if it's Z or Y or X. You know, it's very simple. If you want to put this teapot on top of there, you want to move it up, so I can move it there. So I can turn around and I can move it this way. So that's the kind of the move command, which is there. So that's the W key. Now the next one is the E key, and this is our rotate here. Okay, so if I click on this and I click E, now you can see the gizmo has changed. Yeah, it's become a circular type of gizmo. It still has 3 axes, so it has the X axis, the Y axis and the Z axis, and they turn yellow. So if I want to rotate it this way, I can click on this and I can rotate it, and as you can see, it gives you a little bit of a feedback on there, how many degrees you are actually turning. So that's how you use the rotate here. If I don't use these axis constraints, if I don't use these axes to rotate it, and I click on the middle here, what it actually does is it just does like a random rotate around, but you don't really have much control with this, so I don't really use it too much. Yeah, so that's the rotate key. Next we have the scale key, and the scale key is the R key. Yeah, the good thing about it, on a normal keyboard, W, E, R are right next to each other. So it's a really easy way to remember these. W is move, E is rotate, and R is scale. So if I click to my scale mode, now you can see the gizmo has changed. Yeah, so how we manipulate objects is by using this gizmo. And now if I click in the middle of this, so you can see all the axes are lit up in yellow. And if I kind of hold the key down and I go up and down, it's actually scaling the object up. Yeah, so I might want to select this box and scale this box down. Sometimes you don't want to scale it down, you want to scale it in one angle, so I can say I want this one to be a bit longer this way, so you can manipulate it this way. I can grab it from 2 axes if I want it to move in 2 axes, and I can move it this way. Now you might not be able to get a good view of what's going on here, so obviously we use the middle mouse and Alt to move around, and from here now I can actually see how far it's going, and I can kind of scale it up. So that's the scale mode. So let's get rid of that. So that's the R key. So now we know how to move objects around, so we should be able to, now with what we learned, be able to kind of use the middle mouse and Alt to rotate, use the middle button to zoom in and look at all these objects to get a comfortable idea, because working in 3D is mainly seeing in 3D, being able to look around and see where your objects are, how they're lined up, and how we're going to move them around. So let's do a little task. So one thing I recommend people do is do these little tasks where you kind of select an object and you kind of practice kind of moving these objects around. So you practice moving these objects around and stacking them on top of each other. So I could start doing this here. One thing to be careful of is you might think, oh, actually I want to put this box on top of the teapot there. So you'll move it there, and then all of a sudden, you will think that the box is on top of the teapot, but when you actually rotate around, you see no, actually it isn't. And so that's why it's really important to kind of move around all the time and see where these objects actually are, and then matching them up as well. So I might want to put that there, and see I'm using different axes. Sometimes I might move in one axis, and I might want to put this box at the top over there, move it up slightly. So this is the main thing we want to be able to do, is move around in 3D space just the same as we would like a clay model, and be able to manipulate and move objects around with ease. And this is the main kind of thing to learn when you're working in 3D package. It doesn't matter which package you learn, whether it's Maya or Blender or or ZBrush or anything. It is about, and even SketchUp as well, it is about learning how to move around and manipulate objects and be comfortable working in this 3D environment like this here. Being able to go into wireframe mode and see what we've got here. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is I'm going to open up a quick model that I worked on recently. Okay, so this is a model I worked on recently. I'm just going to click on, just change something. Okay, so as you can see, this is my model. I'm moving around it. I can move into perspective view. I can zoom in. I can zoom into this eye. I can come in. I can zoom into this tooth here. I can look around it, I can orbit, you know, and I've gone underneath it. But you can see that I can very quickly kind of manipulate and move into different areas and be able to kind of look around and concentrate on certain kind of aspects of the model. And that's what you're going to be doing a lot when you're working on a model. You could be looking at it, you might look at it from the left viewport, you might look at it from the top viewport, and then you're moving around, looking around, zooming in and out, and these are the keys that you need, yeah. And you'll use these all the time, these set of keys that I've given you here. And if you can master this part of it, then it makes everything else so much easier, because rather than using all these buttons around and having to go there and then click here and then switch to kind of top view and then switch to front view, and then, you know, we want to get you working like a professional would straight away. So you know, we kind of work in this way. Okay, so now we want to look at object creation. How do we create objects? So we know how to use this now. How do we create objects? So we're looking around in our viewport, and what we have here is we have a creation panel. So this plus here, this gives us a creation panel. So what we're going to do is we're just going to practice creating some simple objects. So here we've got a box. So the way that you create objects in 3D Studio Max can feel a little strange if you're used to Photoshop or something like that. If you click on your box and then you kind of click on the viewport, keep the left mouse button pressed, drag it out, and what it does is it lets you kind of create the first surface of this box. So I can move it around. I can see the sizes changing on the right hand side on the panel. So I might want to create a box that's about 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters. Now it's kind of hard to get it exactly right, but don't worry about that. So once I've got the length and the width right, I then let go, and what it does is it goes into height mode. So I'm not pressing anything now, but it's automatically gone into height mode. So now I can try and get this as close to 30 as I can, and then once it's a bit close I can click it, and I've just kind of created a box. And obviously we can move around and we can zoom in, we can zoom out. Okay, so we're going to create a few other things. So we're going to create a sphere. So we just drag the sphere out. Sphere doesn't have any second modes because there's nothing else to kind of change on it apart from its radius. We could create a cylinder, which again is simple, drag out, let go of the mouse, and then it goes into height mode, and now I can set the height. We can create a tube. Now the tube has 3 modes, because what you do is you first set your first radius, then you set your second radius, and then you set your height. So each mouse click kind of puts you into the next mode, and when you're ready you can click that. Okay, so now there's another mouse key which we're going to quickly introduce, which is the right click. So what does the right click do? So if I'm creating something and I'm breaking this box and I decide, oh actually I don't really want to create a box, yeah, I can click the right key and it's a cancel, yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a cancel button here, which is the right click. So that goes for anything. Let's say you press W and go into your move mode, you select the cylinder, and let's say you're moving it along this way and you think, oh no, actually I didn't want to move it in that direction. You can press the right mouse button and it will jump right back. And that goes for anything you're trying to do. If I try and copy this and I made a mistake, I can press the right key button, and that goes with a lot of things. So as long as you haven't let go of the left mouse button, you can right click and it will cancel what you're doing. So it's a very useful tool, that is. So now we'll go through, create a teapot. Okay, so we can create a plane, which is just a flat surface. So I would say really practice kind of working with these. So see, I've made some text there. I can create my manipulation mode. I can click the E button to go into rotate mode, and I can rotate something. I can rotate it this way, and then I can move it up, and then if I look at it from this direction I can actually get an idea of actually whereabouts it is. So I might even actually just want it there. Okay, so now that I've created these objects, how do I modify these objects? So there's loads of different things that you can make in here, but we're not going to go through those yet. We're going to keep it simple to start off with. So next to the create panel at the top here, you've got all these different panels. We're not going to use any of those panels. We're just going to use the first one to create simple objects. We're going to use the second one to actually modify these objects. So if I click on this box now, it gives me the length, width and height. So I wanted these to be 30 centimeters. So I can click on this and type in 30 and move to the next one, 30 and 30, or let's say I change my mind and I want that to be 15, and if I do that you'll see the box straight away change to the correct size. So again, with the sphere I've got the radius I can change here. With the cylinder I've got the radius I can change and the height. Okay, and I've also got this as well. So with the text tool we've got some added functionality where we can kind of we can type some objects in. So we can actually select the text, change the font, so we can change the extrusion of this text. But all these things are kind of built into these objects. So I've created some text there, and I can move it around and manipulate it. So this is kind of like the thing that we want to get people doing, is kind of making these objects, and then once you've made these objects I want you to start kind of like stacking them on top of each other. Let's see if you can kind of stack them, drag them around, make two different kind of start to manipulate these objects, start to change them and start to learn how they work. So see there, if I've got this inside there and I can't see it, obviously remember we've got our wireframe mode, so I click on F3 and I can see what is inside there. So I can get this now and I can, using the gizmo, sometimes what might actually happen is when you're trying to move something you might accidentally click on the other object. So when we are in this mode we can't actually see which object is actually selected. So if we press F4, the object that has got a white wireframe is the one that's selected. So I want to select what's inside. If I click on F3 to go into wireframe mode, I can zoom in and I can click on the object that's inside, and then I can move this up. I can see it. So 3D is a lot about, working in 3D is a lot about going into these different modes, seeing things in different ways, and then manipulating these objects in 3D space and being able to control them. So I might want to grab this, I'll move it in this direction first, and then I will move it up. Okay, then I will grab my text and I'll move it up. So first of all, practice doing stuff like that, working with these primitives, working on these objects. That is where we mainly start, everyone off. Okay. So the next thing we want to learn is how do we kind of modify these objects? How are we gonna move beyond what we've created here? So I'm just going to delete these objects here, and I'm going to create another box. This time I'm going to make this box really kind of tall. Okay. And what I want to do is just practice working with this box and working with some manipulators. So I'm going to add some height segments here. So on the box mode, in the modify panel, you can actually add these segments down the side, and I'll explain why these segments are really important. So if we add, when we go into the modify mode, we've only got a certain set of tools that we can edit on this box. There's not much we can do. We can change the length and the height, and we can kind of change how many segments we've got on there. But the thing is, that's kind of a bit boring. What else can we do with it? So when we have this modifier list down here, we have this massive list of modifiers that we can use. Yeah, now all of these have different functions. Yeah, now I'll show you the first one that we learned to use is the bend one. So if I come down here and I click on bend, what it does is it actually adds the bend on top of the box here. If I click on this box now and change the angle of it, what you'll find is that it's actually starting to bend the object that I've got. So this object is bending now, and so I can change the direction of it, I can change the angle of it. But at the same time, with this stack, I can still move back down the box and still change the segments. I can still change the length and the width. So what it's doing is it's letting me kind of move backwards and forwards. So I can click back on my bend, and I might want to bend it a little bit more. And if I click on this eye, so if I've bent it and I click on this little eye icon, I can disable it as well. So that works with any object. So let's go back to our create panel. Let's make a very simple kind of teapot. Yeah, made a teapot there. And then we're going to go back to our modify panel, and let's pick another modifier. Let's click a twist. Okay, so let's say I want to twist this, and I start to increase the value of that, and you see it's starting to kind of twist this object here. So there's loads of little functions that are available in there, and what you do is, you know, these are kind of very helpful. If I click on this remove modifier, I can remove the bend, so the bend is gone now, and I'm going to add a twist to this. So I'm going to add a twist to this now, and I'm going to twist it, and what you'll find is that when I start to twist it more than you know quite a bit, what happens is it starts to kind of go a bit strange. The problem here is that it hasn't got enough detail in this model. There's not enough kind of points to move around, and so this is a really important part of 3D modeling as well. It really matters how many kind of edges and faces that you have. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to move back down into the box mode, okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the height segments. What you're going to see is as I increase the height segments, you're going to see that it's actually able to manipulate more of the object. So if they've only got one, you can see the twist doesn't really work properly. The more detail you add to it, the more smoother this becomes. And so 3D objects are made out of points, edges and faces, and that's what we're going to look at next. Okay, so the best way to look through these modifiers is just to go through them one by one and try and see what they do. You know, one that we use quite a bit is FFD, which is a freeform modifier. If you click on the little arrow next to your modifier, it'll give you extra control. So if I click on these control points, I can actually start to move these points around and start to manipulate this object. So really useful modifiers, yeah. So have a play around with those, you know, make some objects, add some bend modifiers, add some what is it called, taper modifier is really cool as well. You know, you can taper your object. You know, it does really funny things with some of the objects here as well. So if I get rid of my twist and let's add a taper, and there you see I can kind of like taper and kind of, and it's really important kind of manipulators that we use quite regularly, but you'll learn those as you go on. Yeah, so that's just like a little thing. So far we've learned how to navigate the viewport, how to zoom in, zoom out, how to pan the viewport, how to click from top view to left view and look at these objects, move these objects around. So the gizmos still work in these. So if I wanted to put this upside down, I could put this upside down and I can move this down to there, okay, and I can move it underneath. I can grab this box and I can remove that. I can edit the height. I could turn the segments back to 1. So the thing is, getting used to these kind of controls and navigation techniques is really important. Okay, so next thing we're going to look at is a snap setting. So if you find that your gizmo isn't working like this, you might go in and your gizmo doesn't work like this. I'll show you how to set this up. So this is something that I do every time I use 3D Studio Max. Wherever I go to work, I will do this as standard. Yeah. So next tool we're going to learn is snapping. And I think that's the last thing we're going to cover today, and I think that should be enough for one day. So the snapping tools are up here. So you've got 2 snap tools here at the top. There's 3, which is a snap toggle, and then you got your angle snap toggle. So what happens is when you're moving things around, you know, sometimes it can be a bit hard to kind of match objects to other objects in 3D space. Yeah. So if I want to move this teapot on top of there, I can go to the front view. I can zoom in. I can move it there, and you know, I have to zoom in and see. Oh, actually, is this quite accurate? You know, it can get a bit confusing. So let's say, for example, I've got this, I've got a surface on the floor, So I'm looking at it from the left viewport, and I want to see, are these teeth touching the floor? So I can zoom in, and I can look at this floor. Oh, actually this isn't touching the floor, there's a bit of a gap there. Now this can be really kind of time consuming, is coming in here and then making sure you move it down and then zooming in. So what we use is we used to use something called snapping. Okay, so we're going to use a snapping technique to kind of speed things up. Yeah, so I'm going to make a box. We know how to do this. Drag out, let go, height, create a sphere, drag out, let go, and then we create a cylinder. Yeah, okay. So these are all different heights, different widths, and we want to be able to kind of move things and manipulate things very easily. So we use like a snapping. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to set up the snap. So the shortcut for this is S. So if I press S, it's going to switch on the snapping. Yeah, so what this does is, so if I press S, it's going to start to snap to different objects. So what I can do is I can highlight the direction that I want to move in, pick the point that I want to move, and then I can kind of select the point that I want to move it to. So you can see that's exactly moved to the correct point. If I move it in the up direction and I move it to, and I touch this corner, it'll move it into that corner. Now it doesn't work like that in Max straight away. Yeah, this is the best way to use it. If you want to set it up like that, if you just right click on your snap settings, make sure it's set to vertex. So I'm going to put this here, the snap, set your snap to vertex, and also in the options click on enable axis constraints. So these two things are very important. Make sure vertex is on, so what it's snapping to these points on the 3D model, and also make sure that enable axis constraints is on. So once that's on, once you've got those settings, what you'll find is you'll be able to very easily kind of like snap objects. So as you can see it's jumping around and moving around. So if I wanted to move this sphere to the top height of this, I could select the click on the Z, so that's highlighted now of the gizmo. I could click at the bottom, and I could click like that. Now what you'll find is, if I go from my left view, you can see that these objects, if I select the right point, and then so if I select the right point here, if I select that point and I move it to there, can you see how it's kind of snapping? And if I want to go to the top of the cylinder, it's snapping exactly. So go to my front viewport and I can see this now. So this is why moving from front viewport to left viewport is very important. So let's say I wanted this edge of this cylinder to kind of move there. So I'm going to click. So I'm going to click on this point here. So I've already got my X selected there because I want to move in that direction. So I click on this and I can snap to here. And as you can see, it snapped exactly to that point. And if I wanted this sphere to snap exactly to that point, I can do that. Yeah, if I want the middle point to come down to there at the top of the cylinder, I can click the middle point, and as you saw there, I clicked on the Y because I only want to move it in the bottom direction. I can do that, and now it's at an exact kind of point. If I click back F3 and F4, you can see that I've been able to move it around and match these points very easily. And this is very important because what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to very quickly kind of just move things down, move them around. And when you're creating objects, you know, you want to be able to kind of move these objects to the right point where you want them. So I might want them on top of the cylinder, do I want them on top of there, or do I want them on top of the box? So then I can move them in this direction, you know, and this is very useful. So what you'll be doing is you'll be pressing S to put your snap on, and you'll see the center will go circular. And then you'll switch it off because you don't want it there all the time, because I might want to snap this to the top of the cylinder. Yeah, and that's cool. Yeah, but now I want to place it manually, so I'll press S and now I'm out of snap mode. Yeah, okay. So the other snap that we use quite a bit is the rotate tool. So let's say I wanted to put this cylinder on the side of this box, and I'm going to grab it. I'm going to press E for my rotate, and I start to rotate this. What you're going to find is that it's going to be very hard for me to get it exactly at 90 degrees, and that is not very good, yeah, because we want to be as accurate as possible. And so if I do that and I go to my front view and I zoom in, you can see here that it's not exactly straight, yeah, which is not really good. Sometimes we want it to stay straight. Okay, So what we do is we use angle snap, and the shortcut for that is A. This is very useful, you use it all the time. So if I press A now, the shortcut key is the actual key is up here, angle snap. So if I press A, as you can see, it's lit up now, and I can click on this, and when I rotate, it's actually going to rotate in 5-degree intervals. Now this is very useful because I can just quickly go down and 90, and I can see if I go to my front viewport and I zoom in and I click to wireframe, it is exactly in the same location, it is exactly straight. And we advise people who are starting off modeling, always try and keep your objects, if you can, keep them straight along these axes, because it makes your job really easier. And I'll show you an example of why this is important. So from my front view, if I create this donut for us, and I kind of look at this object, I want to manipulate this object now. So don't worry if you don't know what I'm doing at the moment, but just have an idea of what I'm trying to manipulate, the edges on this thing. So if I do this, I can kind of manipulate the edges of this object, and because I'm scaling it in these directions, it's actually quite easy. So I can grab this side and I can grab this side. Let's say I want them to move out, I can kind of so I can kind of scale these out. So that's quite easy. I know that they're in the same direction. Now the problem comes if your object is rotated and I try to do the same thing again. So if I try to do that now and I try to scale these, what you'll find is they're actually scaling, still scaling in a straight direction, but now what it's done is actually, so whereas they were parallel to these lines, what's happening is they're scaling away. Yeah, now there is a way around this, but at this moment in time we're not going to go that deep into it. We just want you to know, wherever you can, just try and keep it in the keep them either going in the X, Y or Z direction. It'll just make it really easy for you when you're manipulating objects. Okay, so next thing we're going to look at is we'll just quickly do like a little bit of a modeling demonstration now, because I think you've looked at all these things and you think, okay, so that's pretty cool, I can move around and stuff, but how do we start actually modeling objects? Yeah, so what we do is we usually start with a primitive object. So what I'm going to do is take the example of the skull that I've got. Let's say we wanted to build a skull, so I'm going to quickly just create a box. Let's say this is going to be the start of my skull. Currently the box doesn't have much kind of control over it, so I can add some segments to it, I can take them away, and you know, I haven't really got much control over it. So what we do is we tend to convert this object to an editable poly. So this is what you do. So if you right click on your object, convert to editable poly, and what it does is it changes the object. I can no longer change the width and height anymore now, but what it does is it gives me these other controls here. Very quickly, I'm going to show you these. So if I click on vertex, as you can see, you see these little blue points come up, so I can click this point and I can use the WER controls to move these. If I control click, I can select the next one, 2 of them, and I can move them around. So they're called vertices or vertex. And then we've got edge mode, and with edges you can actually select different edges, and I can move these edges around. So I grab this edge and see I'm using the same tools that we've learned, not doing anything different from what we've been learning. So I can move them in that direction if I wanted to. I can look from this direction, move in that direction, which I don't want to do at the moment. And so that gives me the control over this object. Next thing we've got here is we've got a border. We're not going to cover border at the moment, it's not useful for us at the moment, but the next one along, which is polygon, is the one that we're going to use. This polygon is really important because I can select the polygon and I can move them. Yeah, so the polygon moves the edges and the edges move the vertices. So if I move this polygon, or if I rotate this polygon, you'll see it move this way. If I click on the edge, then I can select any edge that I want and I can move it. If I want to move 2 edges, I can control click and I can move them, and I can move around. I can select this edge. So if I was looking at it from the side view, I could move these around. Okay, so shortcuts for these. So shortcut for these are so we're looking at edit poly mode. 1 will give you vertices, 2 will give you edges, and 4 will give you polygons or faces. Okay, so what I can do now is I can press 1 and I can go to move the point around. I can press 2 and it goes to edge mode and I can move the edges around. I can press 4. So these are like really quick shortcuts, so I can quickly move around. I can start moving all this stuff around. Yeah, so I'm just going to press Control Z, Control Z, Control Z and move back to where I was. Okay, so when I go to vertex mode, you'll see the controls here are going to change. When I go to edge mode, it gives me edge editing modes, and this is where the real powerful part of 3D Studio Max is, where you start to kind of manipulate and edit and edit these 3D objects and try and create the shapes that you want to create. So at the moment, let's say I'm creating my skull, so I'm going to look at this from the front view, and it's a pretty square looking skull at the moment, and I haven't got enough detail here. So at the moment, if I go to F3 mode, I haven't got enough detail here, so what I'm going to do is actually, because I've manipulated this box, I'm going to delete it, create a new box. Okay, there. So can you see I just pressed the F key to move into the front viewport. So I'll press F3 so I can see this. So there's not enough detail here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this edges here. And what I'm going to do is, and this is a new function that we're going to learn, which is drag down, and I'm going to select. So I know that in 3D space I've selected these edges, but what it's actually done is if I rotate around with the middle mouse button and Alt, I see I've selected the back edges as well. So it may look as if I've only selected 2 edges, but when you look at, and this is one thing that you have to learn to kind of manage in 3D, is that when you're selecting objects in a 3D space, you're not just selecting the thing in front. Sometimes you will accidentally select the thing in the back as well. So I've selected that back one. So let's say, for example, I selected this, I selected that, and I started moving this around, and I was thinking, oh wow, what's going on here? So I'm moving the wrong edge around as well. So you can work in 3D space as well. So if I drag, it creates this dotted line, and I can select all the edges there. And there's a function here. The only function that we're going to learn today is just to connect. So we're going to go into edge mode, select the edges that we want, and we're just going to connect them. And what this does is it adds an extra row of edges in my model. Okay, so I'm going to click back to the front view because I'm only interested in one side of it at the moment. So I'm going to click on points. I'm going to drag around these boxes here, and the reason I'm dragging is because I want the back one as well. Okay, if I just select one, you'll see that only one of them is moving. So this is where, like, people, when they start off, they have these issues where they don't kind of understand what they're selecting. So I'm going to select both of them, and I'm going to start to kind of just trying to create a rough kind of shape of a skull. Bring that back over there. So again, we haven't got enough detail in here, so I'm going to select all these edges across here. So see, I've selected all those edges across there, and then I'm going to click on the connect, and it's going to give me another set of edges. So let's kind of manipulate these. I'm going to very roughly start to kind of as you can see, I'm just selecting the points and I'm moving them around. And what that's doing is it's creating the shape that I want. So if I look at it now in orthogonal view, we can see from the top view, oh, actually from the front view it might look alright, but from the left view it's actually not looking very good. So I can just quickly grab all the edges on this side and start to looking at it from the left view now. I can select these and I can move them a bit closer so they're a bit more of the shape of a head. So you can see that I'm kind of switching between going into front view to see from the left view, but I'm also going to perspective view so I can actually see the object. So you kind of like alternate between these. So I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm just going to select these in the middle. I'm going to connect. And the thing is, this is like a good way to learn how to work. So I'm going to go to scale and I'll start scaling these bits out so I'm get that nice kind of rounded shape that I want. Now what I can do is I can start to kind of move these objects around and start to manipulate this shape, still using the axis. And I'm only using the things that you guys have learnt today, so I'm not using anything new or any kind of magic tricks. It's just all these objects here. This is all I'm doing. So I can start to kind of manipulate these objects to select. So I'll select the other side as well, and I'll move this around. Now I don't want to keep repeating myself, you know, I'm having to do it on this side and that side, and I might accidentally just select this and then do it and then forget the other side. So what we do is we go into the top view, and we want to save ourselves as much time as possible. So I'm going to go into the polygon mode, which is 4, and then I'm going to select all one side of these polygons. Yeah, so I'm going to select all one side. So if I go to here and go into this mode, you can see that they're highlighted red, all the objects, because what I did was I created, and what this selection mode does is anything that intersects the lines becomes selected. So if I just do that side, I know that all of those are selected. So once you get used to this 3D viewport, you can easily select them. If you don't want to select them like that, you can select them. So I can do one by one and select them. So this is the slow way. This is how they teach you in normal, like when you go to class, and they'll say, yeah, press control and you select these objects, and then one by one, and it takes you ages. And I say, you know, forget that, just look at it from this angle, select those, you know, it's selected everything on that side, and then let's delete it. Yeah, so I've deleted that now. I've only got one side, and what I'm going to do is, remember these modifiers that we looked at, there's some really useful ones, and the most useful one in this whole list, the one that you'll probably use on every project, is symmetry. So there you go. So I'll just put down modifiers. So we looked at bend, we looked at taper, and we looked at twist. Those are pretty straightforward, but this one, symmetry, is a special one. Spell that correct. Double M. So symmetry is really important, because what symmetry does is it actually creates a copy of your object. So at the moment when we're looking at symmetry, oh, actually it's going the wrong direction. It's going from this side, it's going from this side to that side. I want to go from this side to that side, so I want to go along the y-axis this way. If I click on the Y, what it's going to do is it's going to change it to this direction, but oh my god, my object's disappeared, and the reason for that is because it's trying to copy the other side, which hasn't got anything on it, to the other side. What we can do is it gives us a little bit of control here, which is flip. So we flip that, and what it's doing is create a copy of this now. So now we've got that on the, so this is called a stack. So symmetry is on top, but I don't want to, I can't do anything in the symmetry, so I'm going to go back to my edit poly here, and so I can still select all my vertexes. And what we've got is we've got a little control here, which is show end result. And if we click this on, it shows us what happens at the end of the stack. So this is what's happening now. This is what happens if we add all the other things together. Okay, so we want to see, actually there's a bit of a gap there. So if we go to symmetry and we click the arrow next to symmetry, it's actually got a little mirror control. So let's click on the mirror and say, yeah, we want to move this. Yeah, we want to move this, but remember, we want to work fast, and we learned how to snap, so we're not going to just guess. You know, we don't want to just guess where we're moving it. We press the S key, which switches on our snap settings. We click on this, and then what we're going to do is we're going to drag it, and we're going to touch the corner that we want it, and it's in the perfect place. So I'll switch the mirror back off, back on symmetry, and I can come back to my edit poly. And now what the cool thing is now that if I edit anything here, if I edit anything here, what's going to happen is, can you see it's actually moving on the other side as well? So I'm actually kind of just editing in one place, and then you know, I'm actually kind of, if I move things in this direction now, I'm moving it in the other direction. Now my skull is coming along now, so I need some more detail. So another control that we have here when we're selecting, so if I switch this off, so when we're selecting edges, we can select edges. So I can select these two edges, and I can click connect, and you can see it makes a little an extra edge. It gives me an extra edge. When you've got an extra edge, you can actually add extra detail. Okay, but I don't just want it there. We try our best to keep everything in squares. It's easier to control, and later on down the line when we're going to be doing other functions, you know, these are going to be extremely useful for us. Yeah. I'm just manipulating these, I'm moving these around, and I'm just editing this shape in 3D. Oh, I'm sticking out a little bit. So from this angle, see, I'm selecting the X and the Y so I can move it, but all the time I'm always just looking around my object. So from here it's looking a bit flat. Let's move that out a little bit. Yeah, so we've got this kind of head shaped effect. And if I click on the show end result, I've got my kind of the beginnings of my skull I've already made there. This is how we do it. So we've got another control. So that's how we're going to start off modeling, and in later sessions after this we're going to start doing some more advanced stuff. But if we can get to this point where we can move around, we can manipulate objects, we can see that, you know, things aren't totally looking right, and we can start to manipulate these objects, start to edit them. This is where we want to get to. Then once we're here, later on we'll start looking at some more kind of advanced tools. The ones that people don't look at usually are things like this, where instead of kind of moving the points around, we've got a freeform tool here, and we can start to kind of move things around very quickly and intuitively, rather than kind of moving points around. I'm just using it. And now I use a Wacom tablet when I use 3D Cinema Max. I'm using a mouse at the moment because most people use a mouse, but I have done a tutorial about how to use a Wacom tablet with 3D Studio Max, and I will release that within the next couple of days. So this is how we're going to start modeling. So that's all we're going to cover for today. Hopefully you found that useful. If you've got any questions, just get your questions over to me, and if I've missed any questions on the feed or anything like that, I'll try and answer them in the next session. But hopefully you learned something from that, and we'll continue doing these live sessions, and we'll start looking at other software as well. And so thanks for attending the live stream.